everyone. We're just going to get started. It's 3 minutes after 2:30, so I want to be just cognizant of your time as well. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday to all of you. I hope you're enjoying your day here at Design for Drupal. My name is Dharmesh Mistry. What I'm going to talk today is customer experience as a strategic differentiator. And I started thinking about this topic a couple of months ago, and the reason I'm talking about this is that we talk about user experience a lot, especially in the last few years, but how do we take this to the next level, and what is the role that each of us play while we are deciding to build an experience for our customers, not just for external customers, but also for our internal stakeholders. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to have a slight bit of overlap in terms of what the keynote speaker was saying in terms of how the brain works and how cultures impact. So I'm going to try to reduce to not repeat the same points and talk about some other examples. All right? So let's get started. A fair warning, I may have gone a little crazy with the animations, so you might have to just deal with that. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name, as you know, is Dharmesh Mistry. I started my career in usability, and I went to Bentley for the Human Factors Information Design program. And what I did there was mostly for almost a year and a half, I was in school. I was also being a usability testing consultant, if you will. So did a lot of, the fancy mirrors and greeting the participant and doing lots and lots of usability testing across industries. The more time I spent, I realized that there is a need to start focusing on something else, which was more important, and I started working on user experience. That's where I started working at Acquia. I see some of my friends here. And during my time at Acquia, I also got very heavily involved in the Drupal community, especially working on Drupal 8. And then I decided to try something different post Acquia, and I joined financial services. So, hence that explains my outfit a little different from yours. Reminds me of the ad that the Microsoft versus Apple. I kind of feel on the Microsoft side. But bad jokes apart, what I'm starting to do at Liberty Mutual is that although we are heavily involved in creating engaging experiences, not just on the user experience side, but also on the customer experience side. And my role is more of an experience consultant that does not only define digital experiences, but also physical experiences. And now what is happening in the industry, if you're working with enterprise organizations, that they have multi-channel ways of communicating to the customer, there is not one solid way of putting that trajectory into an experience, or rather map that experience effectively. And the reason why this is becoming a problem is that if you are keeping an eye on what's happening in Forrester and any other of these organizations where they track experience, they are going to say by 2020, most of the big companies are going to have more or less the same feature set. And what is going to be the defining ability for the customer to choose one over the other is going to be experience. So we need to start thinking about experience in a more strategic way, not just because if it is you're a designer or you are a chief experience officer or you were in sales, but I think it's a collective effort that we all need to start thinking when you are writing your code, when you're designing something, when you're talking to your customer. You need to speak as a brand for yourself and for your organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about all these steps, hopefully not in too much detail that will bore you. So one thing that we've been talking, especially in America, that has worked so well in the last few decades, should I say, is the customer is the king. We are going to bend backwards if I'm trying to be not so nice when we talk about our customers. I have seen organizations where they have made drastic changes to their products and platforms just to get another contract, and unfortunately that does not go very far. Now, I don't want to discuss the business decisions that they made because I'm not skilled in that area, but what I want to say is that customer is not the king anymore. What is important is empathy, and empathy is not just for your customer who is an external person, but also for the internal person. The last few years, as I said, I've been very focused on trying to figure out the trends and analysis in customer experience world, and one of the important forums that they discuss is the customer experience forum that just happened in May, and I don't have data to support from that, a lot of it, but I have a lot of data from 2014 which still applies to what we're going to talk about. So in 2013 they said it is the year of empathy, because they come up with these cool ways of thinking about how we want to strategically focus the attention in enterprise organization that somehow permeates into middle sections, middle markets, and then into smaller industries as the year progresses. But 2013 was the year of empathy. 2014 was the year of I'm getting it wrong. 2014 was the year of empathy. 2015, this year, is the year of the internal customer. I don't want to say that we need to go with what is the trend for the year, but we need to start thinking about is that the experience that you're creating is, if the experience that you're creating for your internal person should be the same for your external person, or vice versa. There is no way that just because you're using an internal system has to be better or worse. Most cases we know the answer to that question. The internal systems are, probably not given so much importance as the external ones. But we need to start changing that, because these are the moments that are going to define the experience of the internal person and the external person, and they are going to define about the motivation, the level of involvement, the amount of change that you can produce, and see what innovative ideas are going to stick or not stick. So, going back to the basics of, if you talk to a customer experience person, what is CX or UX? CX is customer experience, UX is user experience. What is that they are striving for? They're striving for this very fundamentally simple ideology, is that we want you to continue to use our product or service, buy other products or services that we have in our suite, and then also advocate for our products and services. So very simple, we all go by this same definition. We probably use different words, but we want to retain customers, we want to acquire new customers. Now, what is happening is that for a very long time, in not just in customer experience, but if you talk about people in general, what were they thinking is that what is the value to customer from experience was somewhere along these lines. So they thought effectiveness was most important, then they thought it was ease, and then they thought it was emotion. So I'm going to come back to this topic, but just remember that this is what, for a very long time, industry thought that these were the ways we can bring value to the customer. So they are formulating programs accordingly. The other piece that I want to say is that in where is the state of customer experience is in 2013, 2014, they did a massive survey. I think it was mostly enterprise organizations, but I think you can relate back if you're not working for one, is that the executives started asking their chief experience officers is that this is what we want you to do in the industry. 31% executives said to their CXOs that we want you to be a leader in your industry. 29, be the leader in the industry, and then 20% be a leader in any industry. They did a follow-up survey where they asked about the chief experience officers about what do you think, how effective are your programs so that you can achieve what your executives are asking you to do. So let's see what they are saying. 12% of CXOs said that they have programs that are very effective. 3% said extremely effective. Now what you see here is that seems to be a divide between 80% asking you to be a leader or the leader or leader in any industry to only 15% say that they have programs in place where they can actually achieve what their superiors are asking them to do. Now, why is this happening? So one of the reasons that I talked about is the disparity in thinking between effectiveness, ease, and emotion. I'm going to come back to that. But the other one is that it's also a very tricky problem to solve because there is no one size that fits all. There is no absolute answer to the question of what makes an experience effective, useful, and we all try different ways. So if people are in design or in user experience, they know about this problem because there are several ways of getting to the same problem. Normalizing design sometimes helps, sometimes hurts. So what we do in these cases is that we are trying to grab things from different places which may not be a target audience, which may not map to your target audience's motivation, and in the end you see this disparity, the difference between 80 and 15% just getting wider, and that's what you want to avoid. So the way you have to start thinking about is, one, is to bridge the gap between 80% and 15% is understand the real motivation of your customer. I think that is the foundational basis of anything that I'm going to talk. If I want to say that if there is one thing that you probably might be the highlight of what I'm going to speak or what I've spoken is that you have to have empathy for your customer and for your stakeholders. And the next one would be I forgot that. What was the second one? It was something around what I said earlier. Yes, sorry. The second one was around motivation. So truly understanding the motivation of your customer. And by that, what I mean is that it goes in every shape or form when you're thinking about measuring and designing and building, is that why is the customer doing what you are asking the customer to do? If you are in analytics and you're measuring engagement by how many times they're coming to your website, is that really the measure that you want to measure? Does it really matter if your customer is coming onto the site 7 times, where 4 times is not able to make a decision if they want something or not? If they are on the site to buy a MacBook Pro and they're like, I don't know, maybe yes, maybe not, I'm not able to make that decision. Well, there is, of course, there is the personal side of it, but then there's also the design side of it, the experience side of it. And in those cases, it's probably hurting your numbers and giving you a misguided direction, that thinking that, oh, more numbers, more engagement is a better thing. Probably it's not. So that's where you want to understand the motivation of it. And where you understand the motivation of it is the critical part of his emotion. What was supposed to be considered to be the least important in 2014, they said now in at least 11 out of the 17 industries, it's slightly higher than effectiveness and ease. If you go back to the numbers for 2015, where they talked in May, is that in 16 out of 17 industries, emotion was valued higher, at least slightly, than effectiveness and ease. So this is where the trend is converging, is that we are going to having an effective solution, having the robust set of features and easy to use products is not just good to have, it is kind of a must have. What is now going to be the differentiator in the experience world is emotion. So let me tell you a little bit more about emotion and the role it plays in our lives. So I'm going to quote a few basic things from psychology and neurology and how emotion helps with what we buy and what we perceive and what we want as far as consumers, consumeristic things are involved. One is thinking and doing. So a lot of times the advertisement industry is always fascinating to me, is that what it's trying to do is that when you are watching TV while you are working on something on your tablet, you're browsing your Facebook, you're sort of passively absorbing the information on your TV screen, it is not asking you to necessarily take the step and go and like, I'm going to buy this product right now. It is actually creating this pathway in your head, is that, maybe if I buy that product, what it would like be? Would it help me? Would I feel better about it? Would it be useful? Would it not be useful? You are contemplating, and that's all they care. They're not necessarily asking you to make a decision. What they're asking is that over the period of time, it is going to set the same set of brain cells, or rather, it's going to activate the same regions of your brain over and over, that you are sometimes going to make that decision even if you are not necessarily fully invested in it. It's one of those things, is that the more you think about something, you get invested in that thought process, right? How many times have you thought about, I don't know if you relate to this, but let's say if you had 3 job offers and one was extremely that, was something that was going well, and you start more and more thinking about it, and the more you think about it, the more invested you are, and then when it does not happen, no matter if it was a good fit for you or not, you feel that emotional response to yourself, and you don't like that. So on the other side, product placements and advertisements do the same, is that thinking and doing are kind of, the goal is to activate the same brain areas. So that's why emotion is important when you think about your experience to your customers. The other one is manipulation. Probably not the right word to use, but this has been done so often. If you think about going to Disneyland, they have these signs which says 25 minutes to the ride, 20 minutes to the ride. So it's setting your expectation, but I would not be surprised that it will actually take less than 25 minutes to get to the ride. So you're setting the expectation that, oh, it's going to take 25 minutes, but you are, there in 18 minutes. Although they probably knew all along that it's going to take 18 minutes. It's just clever manipulation. It's setting your expectations in a different way, and you feel a little better about yourself. You're like, oh, just waited 18 minutes instead of 25. They do that all the time when you see about pricing on Amazon or any other product, where they won't show you necessarily 2 that they want to sell. They'll always show you a 3rd category, which is not something that they ever wanted you to pay attention to. Or it is just by comparison, you are going to think that, oh, that is ridiculous. Why would I pay so much money for that category? I'd rather stick between 1 and 2. So it's slight manipulations like these kind of hurt and help. I'm not suggesting we go that way. I'm just telling that this is how people do it. And then the last one is, I think the most important one is decision making when it comes to emotional responses. Decision making is hard. It's extremely hard. How many of you, okay, I'm going to set up myself for failure for this, but how many of you guys who drink coffee drink the same coffee at the same place every morning? Okay, I knew I was setting up myself for failure, but traditionally, if you do some Google research, you'll basic that most people try to do the same things where it is too time consuming or it requires too much attention because they think it could get exhausting. For me, I try to drink the same coffee every morning, Monday to Friday. It's almost like I have 100 decision making dollars, and I don't want to spend $1 more on deciding should I get a latte or should I just stick to my drip coffee. But over the weekend, I know that I'm not going to spend those dollars anyway on making big decisions. So I'm going to like, oh, maybe I'll get a latte, maybe I'll try the strawberry acai, whatever nonsense that is. So that's where you don't realize that you are going to spend those dollars effectively, ineffectively, but you're doing that over and over. And this is where emotion comes so important, is that you want to enable your customer in the most effective way to get to the decision that they want to make. Right. And it's a very slippery slope. And I know that it's extremely hard to do that. It requires a lot of other things that I'm going to slightly touch upon, but it is one of the important facets of why do we choose to do what we do. And that is the basis of experience. So, just to recap what I've been talking about, I just wanted to get this quote, and probably she said so much better than I could ever say, is that I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And this is very interesting point to me, and I'm going to bring a personal reference here, is that I'm always interested in people. If I think about my memories, I think about as I'm a emotionally fluid person in memories, right? And by that what I mean is that if I talk about, to my long lost friend, it's like, do you remember 3 years ago we went on this trip and it was so much fun. I would not remember the details of those trips, but I just have a very vague idea of what I chose to remember. There were surely parts where we probably fought and bickered, and one got drunk and one did not, and it was a fun ride home, whatnot. But what you choose to remember is what makes it a sweet deal after. And then there are other people who are more like, they are emotionally fluid, but they retain the specifics, right? And it's a hard balance to figure out where is your audience. Is it the emotional fluid ones, or is it the ones who remember the specifics? And when you talk about enterprise organizations, what happens is that there's the business decision maker, there's the technical decision maker. The business decision maker is, more of the emotionally fluid person. And this is, I'm just basing it on the research that I have done, so don't quote me on it. But more often than not, the business decision makers are more emotionally fluid, whereas the technical ones are more specific driven. So you have to kind of, when you are selling your product and you want to tell the value of your product, you want to kind of balance that out, both things. So so that was about the role of emotion to building a good experience that will differentiate you at least in 2020, if not in 2015. The road to robust customer experience. So this is a very simple chart, or whatever that you would like to call this, but it follows the same principles if you are in software engineering, in design, in user experience, or in customer experience, is that the way you start with this is that you want to know what you need to repair, right? Then you need to take steps to figure out, hey, this is what's broken. I think it makes most sense right now to focus on A, B, and C, and that's it. And that's where you go into the elevate stage, see if it is working, if it's not working, and move to the optimize stage, and then move to the differentiate stage. Now, the beauty of this is that this can follow into several departments in your organization, and you can sort of know where you belong. I know exactly where my company belongs. I know where other companies that I follow belong. But the interesting thing is the number at the bottom is again going from the 2014 Customer Experience Forum. This is where companies, enterprise organizations, or at least the Fortune 500 thought where they were. So it's very interesting that only 6% they thought that they are in this role of self-differentiating, that they are building these products, but most organizations think that they are still in that 47-28% between repair and elevate. And that's where it's such a huge difference. If you can figure this out, or at least move in the right direction, you can only see how much benefit it's going to cost to your organization. So since I talked enough about customer experience, I'm going to go back to my roots of talking about user experience, because that's where my academic background is that the way you connect customer experience to user experience is critical. A few years ago, what was happening is that there were all these controversies and conversations happening on blogs where they said there was this conflict or cold war between what is the role of customer experience and user experience. Do they belong together? Do they need to be separated? And I'm glad that the industry is coming to more of a consensus on this, is that user experience is extremely critical in defining your customer experience strategy. So just to clarify, so user experience, as the world kind of defines it, is your experience with the digital products, right? How is it to browse your website on your desktop or on your phone or on your tablet? So it's very restricted to your digital life. But then the customer experience goes far beyond that. It goes beyond how is your experience when you walk into the store? What did you buy? What did you see? What was your perception about it? How did you react to that perception? What emotionally response was charged in your brain? And then how did you make that change happen? So one good example is contact center strategies, right? When you call a customer service. I know for sure I hate calling contact centers, but there are some companies that are doing such a good job about trying to figure out if you are calling them, and if you are the first time caller, they will give you a slightly different treatment than they would give someone who just keeps calling again and again for a small problem. So there are very sophisticated methods that people are started to use to differentiate between customers and the experience that they offer to their customers. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the user experience, and the point of this, the next 10 minutes or so, is that I'm going to go through different ways of thinking about user experience research and user experience strategies and where your organization is. It's for you, unfortunately, to decide is that if one strategy is more favorable than the other, because it depends on so many other factors that I wouldn't know about your organization. So, how many of you guys have or do use an iPhone? How many of you guys use Facebook or have an account? And how many Gmail? All right, so the reason I'm talking about these three different ones is that they all have very different user experience strategies. By that, what I mean is that iPhone is more intuition driven. It's more about this is how you feel. This is more about having a particular skill set and acknowledging that skill set and going with that interaction and patterns, and more often than not, I think that Apple has done a good job, but then there have been cases like Apple Music, which we know may have not worked well with the user experience side of it, but the iPhone was revolutionary in that way, that it really nailed the experience from the intuition point of view. On the other hand, Gmail, a lot of, or almost all the changes they're doing with Gmail, from what I understand, is all evidence-based. By that, what I mean is heavily involved in the analytics department, how much people are choosing, how much people are clicking on one label versus other, and those labels are defining the 80% use case versus 20% use case. The other problem, or should I say, what is also happening with Gmail is that if you have multiple Gmail accounts, you sometimes see slightly different deviations of the UI because they're constantly testing, A/B testing, or doing all these different experimental designs on you, and you have sort of a disjointed experience for the same product. And then Facebook kind of combines both of those methods and kind of tries to build that. Now what happens with, if you have worked with big companies or smaller companies, that if you think about enterprise applications or built-in corporate apps, they kind of fall down to the bottom of that list. The reason why that happens is that they either don't have the proper skill set, they probably don't have the right processes to integrate between evidence and intuitive designs, and then, or they don't just have the infrastructure like Gmail would have for building the tools to measure and identify what is working and what's not working. So what I would suggest is that depending upon, the good way to start is that maybe start with the hybrid approach. Get a little bit from intuition, get a little bit from evidence, and try to build and constantly iterate and see what's working, what's not working. So it's the same spiel every UX person gives, that, you know, always iterate and test and measure, but that's, I think, the only way to go forward. The other one is understanding the role of multi-channel and multi-screens, right? There was a lot of research done about how many people actually use their cell phones while watching television. Now, the reason I'm bringing television, because it's considered to be America's favorite pastime, and you know, way people watch television is very different from the way I watch television. People watch sometimes actively, sometimes watch passively, and sometimes just as background noise. And in these different ways in which they watch television and how they interact with other devices and with the television, if you have a digital, you know, television, then you're probably watching Netflix or, I don't know, Hulu, and Hulu gives you the option of which ad experience you prefer. So those experiences are so segregated right now, but it's only a matter of time that these experiences are going to be more effective and somewhat creepy, because they'll think that, you probably might think that, how is that this AI version knows so much about me? But you need to have a proper context in understanding the human behavior to connect these dots. And it's extremely important. So if you don't have to deal with the physical interactions in your organization, that's perfectly fine. But I'm sure you are working with the digital experiences on multi-screens, right? You probably are doing it on your desktop. You have an application for your desktop, for your smartphones, for your mobile. And it's not just about the technical things. Yes, I agree that they are far more important, but they are not only the only thing that is important, because the experience that you want to have with your mobile is different from what you want to have on your desktop, right? One of the things is that I'm going to quote a research study that I did recently without going too much in detail about it. They said the notion or the mental model of using a smartphone is that if I can't do it on one click, just like how Apple allows me to do it, why would I bother doing it on my phone? And someone, crazy person, said, I would want to do it while I'm driving. Could not say a word. I politely nodded and gave a very nonchalant response as if I didn't understand what he was saying. But the truth of the matter is that that is an insight to human behavior, right? That they want to do things on the go. And if they can't do it on the go, and if they have to key in extra things, then why not wait till the end of the day when they're in front of their desktops and laptops? So I think permeated into the next point of creating these targeted and tailored experiences for your devices. And then the last one is kind of an interesting trend that you might notice if you, especially the people who raised their hands for when I talked about Facebook, is that earlier this year they kind of created these, or even Google for that matter. I'll give an example of Facebook first. So what they started is that there was this one giant application, right? You have your news feed, you have your messenger. They kind of broke the messenger into two parts. You have to install it separately, you have to use it separately. And then they've started creating these pseudo apps like where you can have your secretly, you can share things without revealing your identity, and then they have WhatsApp, which is a completely different application. So they're trying to segment their applications into more solidified way. But if you think about what was happening in technology industry, like probably 5 to 7 years or maybe a decade ago, is that there were all these disparate functions and they were trying to merge them together. And now they're trying to go outwards. So I don't know necessarily, I'm not an expert in the field to know the exact effects and benefits of this, but it's just something to keep your eye open about and figure out if that makes sense, does not make sense, and where is the industry going. The interesting thing about social media, because I'm bringing this up, is because that is going to be the trendsetter for all the other non-technical industries. I work in financial services, so we are not as fashion forward as technology industries are, and there's a reason why we are not. And we don't need to be, right? We are more about trust, we are more about responsibility, we are trying to move the needle like slightly, 1 degree at a time, rather than shifting it at 80 degrees, and just to realize that people are not paying their bills. So that was about segmenting and desegmenting applications. Just a couple of more slides. This one is more if you are building websites or web applications that are more consumer driven, trying to understand what is helping the customer absorb information about your product, right? For a very long time, there has been this discussion about the role of scroll. And what is the importance of scrolling. Now, there's this new research done is that the way people think about scrolling is that scrolling is just an additional step in absorbing information. Making a click is a decision. And this goes back to the point I was talking earlier, is that decision making is hard. So if you want to produce and give more information, scrolling is not such a bad idea. People don't mind scrolling as much as we think that, scrolling everything that you want on your website has to be before like the front of the full line. You can't fit, there is only so much space, especially if you're talking about smartphones. So reevaluate your your strategy in terms of scrolling. This is definitely, I think, talk too often about it, very rarely done properly, is personalized user experience and interactive stories. You want stories that are engaging. No one wants a story that is dry and dull. Maybe this one is dry and dull, but hopefully you'll find better experiences and stories online which are more engaging. The other one is meaningful micro interactions. So this is just a trend that's just started a year ago, and this is just going off the roof. I had the chance to listen to the VP of design from Google before Lollipop was introduced, and he was giving this hints about micro interactions and what they could do. And now if you use Lollipop, you can see that there is so many interactions and they are very carefully crafted. Some work very well, some probably not so much, but it's just a trend that is just going to get better if you're talking about handheld devices. And then the last one is always about monitoring user experience, because without that, you will never know what's working, what's not working, and what you can do or should not do. The final slide, this is more for my visual designer friends, if any, in this room. There are so many web fonts and type diversities that are available now, so you want to leverage those, but then there has been very interesting studies about what makes a page engaging or interactive or beautiful, and how many fonts or types of fonts you should be using to make it effective. One that really works in certain demographics when you talk about building brand values and trust and absorbing information at least at the high level of just thinking, not doing, is high impact imagery. Especially, you would be surprised so many times that they use images so they are relatable, and they're not necessarily asking you to act upon those decisions or products that you see. It is a very small thing that they put in your head, one image at a time, and it kind of, the whole intention is that it is going to start activate the same brain areas that you will when you actually buy the product or use the product. Material design, they do a lot of good stuff. Most of this stuff, you can just subscribe to it and you'll get more information about that. It's done by Google. What they're trying to do is that we had skeuomorphic design, then we had flat design, so now they're kind of getting a hybrid of it, more flat but a little skeuomorphic, a little bit of shadows and color, different depths to it, which kind of is the trend going with it. And then the last but not the least is the card tile navigation and what's the role that it's placing. Now, the only caveat to this slide is that I am not in any way encouraging or propagating that you should be doing these. The way it works is that in a lot of cases where this comes in handy to think about is when you are working with someone or you're working in a web design agency and your client wants the coolest thing or the flashiest thing or out of the world experience or beautiful experiences as they call, delightful experiences as they call, and they sometimes are looking for these things without not understanding the true value it does it bring or does it not bring to the table. And this is where it goes back to the conversation about business decision makers and technical decision makers and the emotional fluidity and specific things. So that's all from me. I think the last slide is just a summary of things that I've rambled in the last 45 minutes. The one is that we need to start thinking about emotion alongside of effectiveness and ease. And by that, what I say is that we don't need to all be neuroscientists and try to figure out how to do fMRI scans on your every customer that you meet, but it is just trying to absorb that you have an important role, equal important role just as somebody else in designing the experience. The other one is, how do you understand your organization's structure and resource skill set and build that empathy, not just for your customer, but for also your internal stakeholders? No one really, you might be the smartest kid on the block, but no one really likes a naysayer all the time. I hate to break your bubble. It's like, one who's like, yeah, no, it gets really exhausting after a while when someone is not supportive and not helping you move forward. Multi-channel, multi-screen user experience, I think that is something that is most applicable, hopefully, to you guys. And then, of course, being abreast to the design and engagement trends and align it to corporate strategy. The last point I think is very important is that there is the clear distinction between knowing and doing, right? You want to be aware of the things that are happening in the industry, in the marketplace, but that does not necessarily mean you need to take that and put it on your website. You need to figure out that, okay, There is this new sriracha sauce, perfect in the marketplace. I don't like spicy food. I'm not going to use it. Just don't put it on your sandwich just because it's a new and happening thing. But that's about it. I unfortunately have only 3 minutes for questions, now 2. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll be outside. And thank you so much for your time. Oh, yes.
Can you give an example about the micro engagements?
So the micro interactions, if you have the Android Lollipop, so what it does is that if you do one swipe, it will give you a little bit of information. But if you want more information about what you just saw, then you swipe more and will give you additional information. So it's progressive disclosure. For example, if you think about weather, right? More often than not, the understanding is that you do that, you want to get the weather right this minute in your city. And then if you swipe more, then the intention is that you want to probably know the weather in your city for the next few days. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. Happy Friday again.
All right, another round of applause. Thank you.